This is how I turned an American Girl doll from this to this. So the very first step when you get a secondhand American Girl doll is to take it, check it out, and see what is wrong with it and see what needs to be fixed. So the hair of this doll was obviously very frizzled and tangled and dirty, so that would take a lot of work to fix, and she was also very dirty in her body and her limbs as well. You can see with the pictures, she was basically gray in some parts and she had a bunch of stray markings, probably from play, probably from knocking the doll up against various objects. And she also had a lot of stains on her legs and arms that are going to take a lot of work to get out. And here I'm just checking how tight her limbs are because it's very important that a child has a sturdy doll to play with, and over time her limbs will loosen, and that's something we need to fix as well. And I'm also checking to see how firm her body is by tapping against it, because if it's too soft then we will need to add some extra stuffing. Luckily this doll was pretty firm. So the first step in fixing the American Girl doll is taking it apart, and usually there will be a string behind her neck that you untie and the head pops off, and you take all the stuffing out of the body. And it's really important that we take the doll apart because that's how all the deep cleaning happens. And after all the stuffing is taken out, you should basically be left with a limp doll body and a doll head. The face of this doll is pretty dirty and her hair is super dirty as well, and in order to fix her head the best, I want to protect her eyes, because if moisture gets into the doll eyes, then they will rust and they won't work properly anymore, so we will have to remove them in order to give this doll the best treatment. This is a pretty involved process, but basically American Girl dolls are made of vinyl and they're also hollow on the inside. So what we're going to do is we're going to pour boiling water in the head and let it sit for 5 minutes, and that'll soften up the vinyl and allow us to take a wooden spoon and poke around the head and then pop the eyes out. The head gets super hot, so that's why I'm putting on gloves, and you can see how squishy the vinyl is getting. We want to be really careful when we're doing this to make sure the vinyl is soft enough so that we don't crack the head, and we also want to make sure that we don't damage the eyes, because eyes are definitely one of the most expensive parts of an American Girl doll to replace, and this doll actually has gray eyes, which is a really rare color, so if I were to damage these eyes and try to replace them, it would be really expensive, so I'm going to do my best to be very careful. You definitely have to work really fast when you're doing this because you don't want the vinyl to harden before you can finish removing the eyes, because if you try to remove the eyes when the vinyl is hard, then you're going to crack the head and it would be really expensive to replace as well. And then you're just left with this eyeless doll head, which is kind of scary. But step 4 is to clean the doll, and this is definitely one of the easiest parts. You just take a magic eraser and some water and you scrub the limbs really hard, and you can already see how dirty the magic eraser is getting. This doll was absolutely filthy, but you can even see the difference between the two limbs. One looks a completely different shade. And here's the water after the magic eraser treatment. If you thought that was gross, wait till we get to the hair cleaning. So to get the frizziness and the dirt out of this doll's hair, we're going to boil even more water. And how this works is American Girl doll hair is synthetic, and it's basically just like tiny little strands of plastic. And when we put it in the hot water, it kind of melts it down and makes it smooth again, and also gets all the dirt out. You can see how disgusting it looks after just one dip, but this is called a boil treatment, and it's used not only in American Girl dolls but also Barbie dolls and all different types of synthetic toys. And basically what you do is you just dip the head in the hot water for 5-second intervals, and then you wait for it to cool down, brush it out, smooth it out, and do that again about 6 times, so you have a total of 30 seconds in the hot water, and it'll melt down the strands and make them look nice and smooth and shiny again. And that's the water after 30 seconds of dipping. It's absolutely disgusting. Whoever this child was clearly did not do a very good job of taking care of their toys, but her hair looks all nice and shiny again. We already cleaned her skin with the magic eraser, but there are still some stains left on her face and also on her limbs, and these aren't on the surface of the skin. They're actually set in, they were like Sharpie marks or something. And how we're going to get these out is we're going to use acne cleaner, which has a chemical called benzoyl peroxide in it. And what we're going to do is we're going to put some of the cleaner on those spots and cover it with plastic wrap, and then put her out in the sun and let her sit there for a few hours, and the UV rays from the sun and the benzoyl peroxide will work together and bleach those spots, and then the stains will come out. You definitely want to be careful when doing this, because if you put too much on and too much is bleached, it'll definitely be noticeable. And that's also why you want to cover the doll with a blanket when you're putting it out in the sun, because you want to cover all of the areas of the body that you don't want to bleach and you don't want to be damaged by the sun. So while the body is out in the sun, one glaring difference between her hair after the boil wash and her hair originally is that her hair was originally curly. And so how we're going to fix this is we're going to boil her some water again, dip it again, and then use these little foam rollers that you just get at like the grocery store and roll up her hair to curl it. And it's really important that we pull out the hot water again when doing this, because we want the curls to be permanent, and using the hot water will again soften the plastic and melt down the hair and set the curls in the hair. So the stains have been removed, but there's still more wrong with the body, and that's that there are these little shine marks all over her limbs, and that happens when the doll gets knocked up against some surface. And when those two surfaces rub up against each other, the rough surface of the vinyl gets smoothed out and it becomes shiny, kind of like frosted glass. And how we're gonna fix this is we're going to take this thing called micromesh. Micromesh is basically like really fine sandpaper, and we're going to sand the doll and smooth out those shiny parts so they're rough again. You actually want to be kind of rough with this so you're not making the doll even more shiny, but once you're done with that, you can tighten her limbs. How American Girl limbs work is that the joints are comprised of these tension cups that have a string and elastic in them, and it's tension so that when you go and lift the arm up, the arm stays. And so her arms were actually pretty tight, but her legs were kind of loose. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a hairband and tie it around the gap, and it creates more tension in the string. And then you can go ahead and refill the body when you're done with this. You are done fixing the body. This part's kind of hard because there's always much more stuffing than it seems like there should be, and so sometimes you have to take like a wooden spoon and shove it in there. But after that, the doll is all nice and sturdy and ready to be played with again. Now it's time to replace the eyes, which is easily the most difficult and nerve-wracking part of this entire process. So it's basically the opposite of taking the eyes out. You need tweezers this time, but what you're going to do is you're going to fill up the doll with more hot water, let it sit for 5 minutes. You then brute force the eyes back into the head. You really don't want to be taking any chances with this. If you don't think the vinyl is soft enough, then refill it with hot water and do it again, because this is where the eyes can be damaged, this is where the head can be damaged. The first time I tried to do this, I completely did it wrong and ruined an eye and had to pay $20 to get a new set of eyes, and it just wasn't a good ordeal. Sometimes the eye just really doesn't want to go in. As you can see, I'm struggling to put the second one in on the same pour. Couldn't get it in the end, so I filled the head up with more hot water, let it sit for another 5 minutes, and then did my best to brute force it in again. and got it in. Then you want to take the tweezers and you want to reposition the eye so that it's straight and centered, and then you have put your eyes back in your doll and she looks normal and not as scary again. When you're using the tweezers, you also want to make sure you're not scratching the eye because that's also damaging the eye and that also warrants a replacement. And then it's time to put the head back on and you basically have an actual doll again. Now it's time to style the hair. After you basically gave the doll a perm and let it dry, once you take the curlers out, it's not going to look that good. So you're going to spray it down with water and brush it out and kind of just restyle it with your fingers and it's going to look nice again. Finally, after years of being played with, the paint on a doll will start to rub off, and that's the lips and the cheeks. And basically what you do is you just take some acrylic paint, mix the necessary colors, and reapply paint. This is kind of hard. You kind of have to take a couple tries to get it right so that it looks natural and it doesn't look tacky. And here is the lips and the cheeks all painted on, and after you're done with this, you have your final doll. So here's the before, and here's the after.